Welcome, Abbie. I'm so excited to have you here. There's a lot of controversy around psychedelics, as you imagine and I imagine, in our world. I know you've had an experience of talking to some people in the elder movement who were going, hey, just a second here. So I know that it's not only the resistance psychologically, but there's a social resistance to some degree. So let's begin with how did you get involved in this whole field of psychedelics? How did that come about?
Well, it's an interesting story. I'm a baby boomer. I was born in 1958, and I really came of age in the 1970s in Washington, D.C. And our community was awash in drugs. I mean, we smoked pot and we dropped acid and did coke. We did all kind of things. And then, like so many of my peers, my cohort, I got married and I had kids and put all the drugs aside for many, many decades even. And when I was in my 50s, my marriage was ending and my kids were out of the house, and I rediscovered pot. And it was kind of a revelation for me because back in the day, pot it was kind of a social thing that we did. And it used to make me kind of paranoid and edgy. And this time around, pot was just like this. It felt like an ally to me. It just opened my eyes and gave me a perspective on life that was really welcome. And I realized that the difference between smoking pot back in the day and now was that I was much more mature. I had a long time meditation practice. I was more comfortable navigating the inside of my head. And it made me want to share that experience. Now I'm a writer, and so I thought, well, let me write about this experience for my contemporaries. So it's just kind of to destigmatize what there's so much stigma around cannabis. So I started to write about older adults and cannabis. I was lucky. I got a gig with Forbes. I was writing about cannabis in I guess it was the 2018, 19, something like that. And at the time, the story of cannabis was going down. It was, it kind of gotten its heyday and it was going down, but the story of psychedelics was going up. And I was turning 60 at the time, 2018. I read Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. And I was just riveted by that. And I thought, if cannabis can really help us as we age, or if it can be an ally for us at this stage in life, well, let's look at psilocybin. And so it was really the work about end of life. It was Michael Pollan's descriptions of these studies out of Johns Hopkins and NYU, where they were giving psilocybin to cancer patients with, a terminal diagnosis, and they were having these remarkable transformations. And they, all of a sudden, instead of being terrified about dying, they're like, oh, well, this is just the way of the world. And actually, the love of my family is the most important thing to me. And I thought, God, this, everybody has a terminal condition. We all do. And as we get older, that becomes increasingly apparent. And so why wait until you're at death's door to have these beneficial experiences? Why not move it up a little bit? And so that was really a very condensed origin story of how I came to be involved in this topic. And I'll just add that I've always wanted to use my writing to destigmatize and to make things clear and understandable for lay readers. I did that with my work as a copywriter, writing about science and technology. And here I wanted to write about what I see as a really riveting social phenomenon.
In in that you are a writer, and the capacity to express in language the experiences that occur. What would you say to people who are at least open to the conversation about how it impacts aging, late aging specifically? What would you describe? What were the elements? What would you say are the components? What happens that would not have happened if they were not able to do this?
Okay, well, thanks for that great question. And I think that really brings to fore our common interest, which is the notion of conscious aging, which really requires us not to, just go through our later years pretending that this is just an extension of our youth, but really recognizing that this is a distinct period of our lives with opportunities to really make the most of this time. And so a huge component of that is reflection, self-reflection. You need to be able to look inside and look at your assumptions and look at the beliefs that you have and examine them. And in many cases, you're going to find that these beliefs and these patterns of behavior don't serve you. So intentional psychedelic work, and for the people that are thinking about psychedelics back in the day, we're not talking about dropping acid and going to a concert. We're talking about a serious, spiritual, intentional experience that one undertakes with preparation, with making sure that all the circumstances and the conditions are optimal for this experience. And so when you undertake a psychedelic experience with that background, it can open insights into your personal story and into life writ large. So these insights are, I think, exquisitely attuned to the work of an elder. So I'm just working on a piece right now about the concept of letting go. And I think that letting go as elders is a really, really fundamental skill set, let's say, for the work of being a conscious elder. We're called to let go of our notions of how we were in our, we might have been hikers or runners, or we might have once had beautiful brown hair, or the memory, we're losing things. We're losing our friends, we're losing our family, we're losing so much. And we need to accept that, not resist it, and also make place to grieve for these losses. And I think a lot of people don't want to make the place for grieving. And a good psilocybin experience can really help open the floodgates of grief so that you can find, and in my personal experience, so that you can literally experience that grief and joy are in the same breath. And this is the richness and the beauty and the miracle of this kind of wisdom that you get in older age.
Yes. Well, what were some of the insights you had about aging in terms of seeing what you hadn't seen before more clearly, more distinctly, that gave you a sense of freedom and ease and equanimity? What was that for you?
Well, I have the added advantage in answering that question of having interviewed 36 older adults about their psychedelic experiences in older life. So I have a really, really wide perspective and a beautiful perspective about what these experiences offer. And first, I want to say, just to be very clear, this is not, you don't just like eat a mushroom and then you're enlightened. It doesn't work that way. It's a process. You might have what it does, it'll give you a glimmer of some kind of insight that can carry you in your process of growing and learning. So I have seen people use their psychedelic experiences for deep psychic healing. So wounds that they've been carrying around their entire lives from childhood, they were finally at the age of 70, they were like, enough. I don't want to live with this burden anymore. And they were able to do courageous, difficult, painful work so that they could live free of of that burden, of the twistedness of carrying that pain. I saw people connect to their authentic selves, to finally be able to say, okay, all my life I was a caregiver, I was the responsible person, I was the breadwinner. Now I want to be the poet that I always wanted to be, the artist, the dancer. It allowed people to really connect to a voice within themselves that they've been stifling their whole lives for whatever reason. I mean, there are
There's
many more examples.
examples are good because it allows people to relate to their own situation.
Right.
In terms of trauma, what's the impact of a psychedelic experience in terms of, because you just mentioned things they've been carried around forever. And there's a lot of work on trauma and its impact on aging. So what have you found about the impact that psychedelics have on diminishing the impact of trauma?
Well, there are many clinical trials right now about psychedelics for treating trauma, PTSD, all kind of trauma-centric conditions. So in any age group, or adult age groups, let's say. And so what I would add to that is that the joy of being an elder and finally dealing with your issues is that you get to have this last stage of life to really savor it with maturity and to really allow it to impact your life in such a beautiful way. And I would just add that this is work that for people that are really having, have difficult conditions or stories that they're doing, this is work you're going to want to do with a therapist. It's not necessarily something that you're going to undertake on your own. And this is maybe the good point to add that my conversation here is not to recommend to anyone to do a psychedelic experience. And if anyone is considering it, to do their due diligence. There's a lot of learning you have to do. That's why I wrote my book, but there are resources out there. Check your health condition, check your mental health condition, work with people that can advise you before you even consume anything.
Yeah, well, I live in Oregon, where I think we're leading edge, which has developed a structure to be able to do what you just said and to find your guide and to do it in a safe place and to have preparation and you clear before you go and what to expect. And I think it's becoming more universal and more available. But do exactly what you say, Abbie. Take it as an opportunity for a breakthrough in your life.
Right. Well, yeah. I always tell anybody that I'm speaking to or writing about that I think that the programs in Oregon and Colorado are an ideal opportunity for older adults, where you can get a facilitated psilocybin experience with a licensed guide, with laboratory tested and measured mushrooms, with preparation, screening, integration afterwards. It's just for older adults who don't want to navigate the underground or not, they're not going to travel to an overseas retreat. I think it's a wonderful option.
Yep, it's wonderful. A lot of people, when we first introduced this, have safety concerns. And so how do you address the safety concerns for people about engaging with psychedelics?
Okay. Well, there are different medicines and different safety concerns. One thing I'll just reiterate, that you do need to do your due diligence, and you do need to make sure that your physical health and your mental health conditions are appropriate for an experience like this. You might want to talk to your healthcare professionals. Hopefully they'll be open enough to discuss the risks and benefits, or at least the risks of what you're interested in undertaking. So that's definitely an issue. Medicines like psilocybin, which is what's also known as magic mushrooms, are considered to be relatively safe in clinical trials. They're not associated with a lot of adverse events, or if they are, they're transitory, nausea, medicines like MDMA, ecstasy, those are, that's an amphetamine. So for people with cardiovascular issues, that's not recommended. And then there's, all across the spectrum, there's ayahuasca that has contraindications with certain SSRIs. So in short, I don't want to, this is not an exhaustive discussion about what the risks are, but basically the bottom line is do your homework.
Okay. Well, you have a new book coming out in July, Psychedelics and the Counterculture of Aging. Let's talk about when I write books, when I was coached, is you have a reader that you want to get the message to. What's the message of your book? What do you want the reader to walk away with?
Well, when I was writing this book, and I was really thinking about the reader being my people, my peeps, my fellow boomers, and what I wanted them to walk away from was with an updated understanding of the psychedelic landscape, the contemporary psychedelic landscape. A lot has changed in the last 50 years in terms of clinical research, in terms of the medicines, in terms of our understandings of how to approach these medicines safely and intentionally. I think we also understand much more how these are medicines that originated in many cases in indigenous cultures, where they're considered to be sacred, and how we can learn to approach them with reverence. So that's one of the things that I wanted to bring people up to date with what's out there, how to approach these things safely. And that's the first part of the book. And the second part of the book, which is really where I wanted to touch the hearts of the readers, is by presenting a kind of an overview of what these experiences offer us in older life, uniquely in older life, whether it's healing our psyches or connecting to our ancestors or connecting to spirit or experiencing intimacy and pleasure. I heard older adults telling me that, the joyful connection that they had with their partners, with their friends, with their communities. This is such an antidote for the isolation and alienation that so many older adults experience. And this is through these ceremonial medicine experiences. So really, I wanted the reader to come away with an understanding that there's something out there that's very, very intriguing, and that just really kind of to pique their interest.
And you mentioned spirituality a bit, and so the experiences that I've encountered it's opened that door much wider and allows for what you say, letting go of whatever that ego and identity hold so tightly onto, that there is something beyond that's now experienced. Oh, and so it's more of a direct experience of that. The capacity to bring this forward if I was interested, let me say it this way, if I watch this podcast, and I'm interested in pursuing the future through this model, what would you recommend how do they start? Where do they go? What's how do I take that first, second, third step?
Well, that's why, in many ways, that's why I wrote my book. And it'll be out in July, so hopefully you can, the curious potential psychonaut can wait until July, but basically there's an educational process that you really need to do, and dive deep. And there are a number of books out there that now about psychedelics. They're more general. My book specifically addresses the issues of older adults, so that's why I think it's useful. But again, I would recommend to anyone after they do all their screening and after they do all their checking to consider an option in Oregon or Colorado. And I've been in discussions with people in these programs and encouraging them to develop programs specifically targeted for older adults. And I haven't seen any service centers, the psilocybin program operators come out with programs saying we're specifically offering, for clientele that are older. But I think that's going to come.
Yes, it's coming. So there's a psychedelic society in Oregon, very powerful. I want to acknowledge Kathleen Turner, the attorney, who went to the legislation and the legislators and formalized
for
it.
The end of life work.
Right, she did just remarkable work. And I know that there's lots of people interested, but there's this kind of barrier that we've addressed in terms of doing your due diligence, in terms of reading, in terms of looking where you can have this experience safely with the right people and the right guys. So the question comes up, what would be the implications of psychedelics at this time?
Well, we're at a really pivotal moment right now, historically, where there's millions of boomers are entering older age. And we're really finding that our society is very poorly equipped to give us guidance on what it is to be an elder. We really have basically only negative stereotypes. And what I'm seeing in this upswell of interest of older adults in psychedelics is a really exciting repudiation of those negative stereotypes. And what we're actually showing is that elderhood can be a time of growth, of healing, of exploration, of joy, of community. And we're going to show the world, just like we showed back in the day, a new kind of model of youth. Now we're going to be showing the world that elderhood can actually be an amazing and fabulous time.
Yes. My mission is I believe elders can change the world if they're let in.
I agree.
And that their voices need to be heard.
Right.
And so one of the things I'm seeing from all the experiences that I've had is the courage that comes up, actually freedom to speak, freedom to be, freedom to act, freedom to have your presence known in a way that others listen. If there were elder wisdom available, it would change the world.
Right. And I do feel like these consciousness expanding experiences really do give us the conviction to live what we believe or what we know to be true. And so I'm very excited about it, and I'm happy to collaborate with you on that.
I think you're one of the leaders in the right direction.
Right. And I do want to say that I always feel like this is never going to be a mass, the psychedelic aspect of it is never going to be a mass movement. It's more of I see it as a rivulet going into the stream of conscious eldering. But there is a certain subset of people, I call them the seekers, the questioners, the people that are asking, that want to go deeper. And for those people, I think it's if you gravitate towards it, it's for you. If you go, oh, no, it's truly not for you.
In terms of the message that you want to leave people with from this podcast, what would that be?
my message would be a message I'm thinking about a lot, which is about letting go of things that don't serve us. And I think that that's, one of the big uh, challenges that we have in older life. And there's a lot of stigma around psychedelics and left over from the 60s and the 70s. And I would really suggest to reconsider that, to look at the research, to read more deeply, to investigate. These are experiences that are our human birthright, I would say. Mushrooms that cause you to expand your consciousness, vines from trees, secretions of a toad. These are natural compounds. Cultures that have integrated those medicines into their culture understand that they are ways to engage with the divine. And we can be rooted in our rational world where there's no divine and there's no spirits or no anything, but there's billions of people in this world that think differently, and I don't know that we need to tell them that they're wrong. Maybe I guess my message is to open your mind, open your heart. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to grow, and particularly in older life, we're wiser, we're more circumspect. And when we bring that to the fore, and as we approach these experiences, the rewards can really be very, very profound and joyous.